Okay, so we had a preview of sorts of this at Gamescom 2025, but it has now been released. It is now available. GeForce Now's 5080 tier. The new super pods have deployed. And I was given early access, chance to take a look at that. Now, bearing in mind that GeForce Now's 4080 tier is, or rather was, the best cloud solution on the market, bar none, cloud gaming solution. I was really interested to see what the 5080 tier delivers. And what can I say? There are some really interesting features here. The preview that I had only had the 5080 servers working on certain games. I'm not sure if that persists into the actual user side launch, quite possibly. But there's a couple of features I do want to talk about, which I think are really important. One thing to get out of the way, first of all, this install to play feature, I'm just going to read what NVIDIA says about it, allows direct cloud installation of games, expanding the library to nearly 4,500 titles without relying solely on pre-curated support using high-performance NVIDIA NVMesh storage. But I think ultimately, one of the defining factors of cloud systems is the limited array of games you can actually play. This does appear to be an attempt to mitigate that. Okay, so what you're looking at here is actually an adaptation of the cinematic mode that GeForce Now has. Cinematic mode is really, really cool. Basically, it ramps up bandwidth to 100 megabits per second max, more like sort of 95 max, really. 4K resolution can go to 5K. The preset actually starts at 60 frames per second, but the key thing here really is that you're getting full chroma resolution. In fact, the cinematic mode here has 10-bit YUV 444. But what I'm doing here with Avatar is actually using a custom version of that. So it's the same bandwidth, right, up to sort of 95 megabits per second. Same resolution, 4K, but I'm actually selecting 4K 120 hertz streaming here. So that 100 megabits per second actually has to basically deliver twice the amount of frames as the standard cinematic mode. But the point is, I think this is still the best way to play. You're still getting that full chroma image quality there, which is, as close to standard desktop PC as you're going to get. It's really, really cool. It's really, really impressive. So yeah, overall, this is super, super impressive. And the reason I chose Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, well, one thing you'll notice there is that on the stats to the right there, I'm actually using the 4080 tier version of GeForce Now. At the moment, 5080 is reserved for certain games only. Avatar isn't included, but I can still access those cinematic modes and the custom modes that gives me 444 120 hertz. So that's really, really cool. But the reason I chose Avatar specifically is that very high settings here. It's just super, super dense in detail. Like it's one of the most incredibly tough games to compress. And we know this from when we capture the game ourselves using our own video compressors. It really taxes the CPU hard when we're doing that. But here, GPU encoding seems to work pretty great. And even at 120 hertz, it looks great. So yeah, very, very, very impressive, I've got to say. There's other features in there as well, obviously. Which we'll see in due course. Something I couldn't test actually does 5K streaming at 120 frames per second, 1080.
Useful for me.
Well, you should give it a go then, John. And 1080p can go up to 360 frames per second, which again would be quite interesting for latency testing, although I wouldn't really want to be gaming at 1080p at this point. So yeah, there's a lot going on here. I think it's really, really impressive. I think the other thing, which is one of the sort of cloud promises that everybody makes, but nobody really delivers. It's like, oh, okay, the servers are in the cloud. We can upgrade them, so you're always getting the latest technology. And pretty much every service that has ever promised this in the past has failed to deliver, starting with OnLive back in the day. But, credit to NVIDIA, you are getting a steady stream of updates. You are getting Blackwell architecture with Blackwell features. I looked at some benchmarks that have been out there. I haven't had time to benchmark it, but it also looks as though the performance level of the 5080 cloud is matching the actual desktop, which wasn't always the case for the 4080. So that's really cool as well, because that would represent a properly impressive performance leap over 4080 in a way the desktop part wasn't. So there's a lot going on here, and the price remains the same at $20 a month. Something else which I think we should bear out is that the CPU side of things has also had an upgrade. I think, I'll have to check this, but I think you're getting Zen 5 EPIC CPU cores, which again is something I'd like to check out. You know, how does that actually translate into an equivalent desktop CPU, for example? But it's all looking really, really cool. And I think at $20 a month, I think there's possible discounts if you're going for like 6 months or higher. I don't know. I need to check that. It does seem to be the case from the past, though. There's questions about this. If you've got a really good internet connection, this is potentially worth a thought, worth thinking about. And I'm curious as how all the maths is going to work out versus actually buying a 5080 based system.
Yeah. How many months does it become worth it at some point in time versus probably in 2 years they'll upgrade it again? You know what I mean? So absolutely.
Yeah. When you get, I mean, there's, you know, we've seen the direction of travel now, you know, 3080, 4080, 5080, they are actually delivering these promised upgrades, and you are actually getting all of these new RTX features, which I think is really, really cool. Yes. Oh, and the other thing which seems to have happened is that the Steam Deck app now streams up to 90 frames per second. That was one of my key issues with the GeForce Now app. When it actually came up on Steam Deck, it seemed to top out at 60. OLED model obviously runs at 90. Why not play your games at 90? You can now, seemingly. So this is all really, really impressive. I'd really like to look in more depth at this. Obviously, things are quite busy for me at the moment. We're still sort of working our way through the whole independent side of things. But what can I say? I'm impressed, and I don't think I've seen much in the way of negative feedback across the various reviews that did go out on embargo day. So yeah, I'm really interested in putting this through its paces. Of course, John. Notably, the 4080 tier was the first cloud system that you would actually consider using. So,
I realistically, in my day to day, I don't have much use for this.
Yeah,
but I respect it. is what I would say. Is like it's the first time where I actually tested one of these things and was like, all right, this is actually good. Like, and by good I mean like it's fully playable. It actually looks good. It almost looks like it's a native image on the screen, at least in the 4080 tier, and I presumably this one's a bit better. So I'm curious to try it.
Oh my god, you have to try it in person. It's actually way better. Like I actually think
wow,
so Rich is maybe even underselling it. Like in the scenes that I saw when I was at Gamescom at the NVIDIA offsite location. You guys were doing other stuff like Phantom Blade Zero, right. I think, or Phantom Blade.
Oh yeah, Phantom Blade.
And there I was with the 5080 tier, and the difference it makes at that near 100 Mbit 444 in like any denser scene, specifically with volumetrics and foliage, it's ridiculous. It looks way better.
All right, so, I mean, I'm eager to try it then, just to see what this is like, because this does feel like. So I could see a use case for this in some, like maybe like say in my living room, for instance, if I wanted to play a game from my Steam library down there. I don't have a PC in that area. That could be interesting. Steam Deck, maybe, you know, playing something above what the Steam Deck would be able to do natively. I mean, there's definitely interesting cases for it. And I'm honestly surprised that they were able to pull it off. Like, I didn't think we'd actually get to this quality this fast, and especially when no other service has been able to pull it off.
Yeah.
Like, I still remember, and it's been a long time now, but when Stadia was first a thing, I went to see it at E3 and played Doom Eternal on it. And I remember just sitting there next to the Google guy feeling like this is so bad. Mm-hmm. And like, but he's sitting right there. It's like, what do I, like, I don't want to be rude, but I also don't want to just like, it's like sugarcoat it. So I'm like trying to balance this, like thinking like, dude, this is horrible. Like, who would want to play this? And I don't think it was ever very good. And no other streaming has been very good. But this one, like, wow, like it's pretty nuts. And I think selling this as like a service that coincides or sits alongside your own library of games, that's cool. It's not trying to replace anything. It's just it's an alternative means to access your existing games.
Yeah, you're not actually buying any games via GeForce Now. I mean, it used to be the case when they first launched the service. They did a kind of on live/Stadia model where you would buy games, but they realized pretty quickly it wasn't going to fly, which is to their credit, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it is the case that you can use your Steam library and connected accounts. By connected accounts, I mean I actually used, when I played Avatar, for example, I booted it from Steam, but obviously it asks for your your Ubisoft Connect login, and that all seemed to work just as it would on a normal PC. So yeah,
I'm actually, Rich, I'm curious if maybe you've tried this, but so the Steam Deck works at 90 hertz, but have you tried docking the Steam Deck and outputting higher resolution video?
So
I haven't, no.
So this is one thing that was at the Gamescom event. They showed a ROG Ally, or I believe it was, at 4K 60 hooked up to a television, and it will stream 4K 60 out from the server. But I think it wasn't. I don't recall if the app that they had access to there could do the new 444
stuff.
Right. Okay.
95 megabit. I wasn't sure about that.
I'd be curious to try it because I actually I put a dock in place where my Switch 1 used to be, but for the Steam Deck. So occasionally, it's fun to mess with it on the TV.
Right.
And I might try it there just to see how it is.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I mean, give it a go if you have the means. Is all I can really say. There are some questions here as to. I mean, you were talking about the concept of sticking it in your living room. There's a free solution for that, John, Moonlight, where you could do it all from your local server.
Right.
So, which is a question that one of the supporters asked this week. How does it compare against Moonlight? That's a perfectly legitimate question. I don't have answers to that. Also got this supporter question from Carvox. Hello, DF team. With respect to the 5080 streaming testing, how much additional latency do you feel is acceptable for cloud streaming in general? Personally, I find myself very sensitive to input latency, so I've been scared away from streaming tech. I was going to say screaming tech.
Screaming tech.
So far as a result. That said, the advancements in GeForce Now are impressive. Where do you think this tech really shines for consumer uses? Keep your stick on the ice, lads. And thanks for the great work. Latency is a very personal thing, and it also relates to the control system you're using. You'll feel latency much more evidently on a keyboard and mouse as you would compared to a controller, where those analog sticks are just massive latency sponges, as we've said in the past. But again, that's something I'd quite like to test, right? What is the latency of the game compared to running natively? Obviously, it will be higher just because of laws of physics, stuff like that. But how much higher? And, how much is acceptable? The thing that we keep talking about is, of course, that every game has a different latency level. And some, the difference at the same frame rate can be very, very high, as we've proven in the past with console testing. So, I think it ultimately just comes down to, it's a very personal thing about how it feels for you. I didn't really have any problems with it, though, but certainly with keyboard and mouse, it didn't feel quite as crisp. But, that's kind of par for the course, really. But interesting stuff. Nonetheless, it's a technology that I think really deserves a deep dive at some point, because it's just really, really useful to be able to have this level of horsepower available, streamed from basically anything.